Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, the peaceful village hills turn into a battlefield, not of fists, but of strategy and hidden intentions. While Hoang quietly builds his business day by day, two men, Dai and Canh, shake hands in the shadows with one goal: to corner Hoang until he has no road left to survive. But what they don't realize is that Hoang has been planning 3 steps ahead from the very beginning. Today's episode is all about betrayal, traps, and the dangerous price of greed. Stay until the end, because the twist in this story proves that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't power, but patience and timing. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us. The noon sun scorched the village like a furnace, shimmering waves of heat rising off the red dirt road as Canh's motorbike screeched to a stop in front of Dai's gate. He adjusted his sunglasses, slicked back his hair, and plastered on the kind of smile that only a man with poison in his heart could wear. He strutted up to the bamboo house, knocked twice, and called out with fake warmth dripping from his voice, "Brother Dai, I came to apologize for yesterday. I spoke out of anger. Let's drink tea, clear the air." Inside, Dai didn't even turn his head. He sat on a bamboo chair, face carved like rock. The tea kettle steamed beside him, yet he didn't reach for a cup. When he finally looked up, his eyes held none of the softness of old neighbors, only cold, measured distance. Canh entered anyway, shameless as ever. He sat down, crossed his legs, and instantly dropped the act. "Let's skip the nonsense," he said, leaning forward. "Sell me your hill. Any price you want. You say the number. I'll transfer. 500 billion, a trillion. Doesn't matter." Dai let out a short, sharp laugh. More insult than amusement. "I don't sell loyalty," he replied, "and I don't work with snakes. You tricked me once. You won't do it twice." Canh's face twisted, the mask falling off entirely. "Fine," he hissed. "Then maybe I'll stop by your father's place. Old man's got a weakness for gambling, doesn't he? A few stacks of cash, and he'll sign anything I want." Dai's fists balled so tight his knuckles whitened, but his voice stayed controlled. "Try it," he said firmly. "You'll see who ends up suffering." Canh stood abruptly, grabbed his helmet, and spat near the door. "You have until tomorrow morning. Decide well. Refuse me, and your whole family will starve right next to Hoang." He slammed the door so hard dust rained down from the rafters. For a long minute, Dai sat frozen. The room felt smaller, tighter, as though the walls were closing in. Outside, cicadas wailed and the sun burned hotter, but his heart felt like ice. Then suddenly, he sprang to his feet. He had to tell Hoang. Now. He didn't even lock the door. He sprinted out, barefoot, shirt clinging to his back with sweat. He tore down the road, lungs burning, every step pounding with the same thought. If I'm a minute late, Hoang loses everything. By the time he reached Hoang's yard, his breath was gone. He stumbled through the gate and practically collapsed onto the porch. Hoang had been sipping tea, completely calm. But the moment he saw Dai's face, panic, sweat, fury, he stood up straight. What happened? Dai swallowed hard, voice cracking as he blurted out the whole story in one breath. Canh came, He wants the hill, any price. Said he'll buy my father if he has to. Hoang didn't panic. He didn't even frown. Instead, he set his teacup down gently and said, like he'd been expecting this all along, "Then sell it." Dai froze. Sell? But that land is the only road to your business. Without it, Hoang, that blocks your whole operation. Hoang's lips curled into a small, maddeningly calm smile. You forgot the old contract you and I wrote back then. Clause 7.2. The buyer must clear at least one road for me in whichever direction I choose. Dai's jaw dropped. He stared, stunned, as Hoang continued, I planned for this day. If he wants the land so badly, we'll let him buy it. With his money, you can buy a better hill, a bigger plot, or even start raising cattle if you want. Meanwhile, I'll simply choose a different route. The law forces him to let me through. The shock on Dai's face slowly melted into pure awe. You set a trap for him long ago? Dai whispered. Hoang chuckled. When you deal with snakes like Canh, you don't stay one step ahead. You stay 3 steps ahead. The breeze rustled the areca palms, sunlight glowing gold across Hoang's yard. For the first time that day, Dai felt the weight on his chest lift. Hope crept back in. He wiped his face, straightened his shirt, and headed back to Canh's house. But this time, not with fear, with purpose. By the time he reached the gate, Canh was outside smoking, squatting like a self-proclaimed king of the village. When he saw Dai return, he smirked, blowing out smoke rings. What now? Changed your mind? Greed won, didn't it? Dai walked forward slowly, calmly, and placed a stack of documents on the stone table. 2 billion, he said flatly. Not a dong less. Canh burst into mocking laughter. Just yesterday, you were talking about loyalty. Dai didn't respond, didn't blink. He just slid the papers over. Greed flashed in Canh's eyes. 1 billion, sign now. Dai signed, no hesitation. The moment the transfer notification chimed on his phone, the numbers lighting up the screen, Canh grabbed the contract like a man holding treasure. Now Hoang has no road, he crowed. He's finished, finally finished. Dai stood, looked him dead in the eye, and calmly said, "Thank you for the money," then walked out without another word. The moment Dai stepped outside, the world felt brighter. The sun still burned overhead, but his heart felt cool, almost peaceful. He had just sold land, but secretly, he had sold a flawless trap. Meanwhile, Canh sat inside, laughing until his face turned red, completely unaware that he had bought the most expensive, most useless plot of land in his entire miserable life. By afternoon, Canh had thrown off his shirt and was swinging a pickaxe himself, sweat spraying as he worked beside his men. He hammered bamboo stakes into the dirt, shouting orders like a man building a fortress. Block the road, fence everything. Let's see Hoang try to move a single log across my land now. Barbed wire twisted around the stakes. Cement hardened in the heat. Thugs with tattoos crawled out of nowhere, lining the path like guard dogs. Canh climbed onto a boulder, held his dagger high, and roared to his men. From today, no timber moves. Hoang has 1 month before his business collapses. Workers gone, banks calling, everything seized. Hot wind swept the hillside. Dry leaves flew like broken wings. Canh threw his head back and laughed, drunk on power. But far away, hidden behind a cluster of tall trees, Hoang watched in silence. His expression was calm, too calm, like a still lake before a storm. Let him laugh, Hoang thought. Because soon, Canh would realize he hadn't trapped Hoang at all. He had only trapped himself. Beneath Canh's feet, cracks spread through the red soil as if the land itself was laughing at the fool standing on top of it. The next morning, dawn broke over the village like a slow-burning ember. A thin layer of mist clung to the hills, softening the jagged silhouettes of bamboo groves and cassava fields. But inside Hoang's small wooden house, there was nothing soft about the atmosphere. Hoang sat at his desk, reviewing old documents, a quiet smile playing at the corner of his lips. Dai, now more composed, paced anxiously nearby. "You're too calm," Dai muttered. Canh blocked everything. He's got dozens of men out there. Who can even get close to that place now? Hoang closed the document gently. "Because it's not me who needs to go near the land," he replied. "It's Canh who must maintain it. And trust me, he doesn't have the patience nor the money for that." Dai blinked. "What do you mean?" Hoang leaned back, letting the morning breeze drift through the window. When someone buys land in a rage, with greed plugging their ears, they never read the fine print. Clause 7.2 wasn't the only clause in that contract. He tapped the document. Clause 8.4. Any major structural change to the land must be approved by the Geological Bureau due to the unstable condition of the hillside. That includes fencing, digging, paving, drilling, everything Canh is doing right now. Dai froze. "You're saying—" "Yes," Hoang replied. "He's breaking the law with every hammer swing." Dai laughed under his breath, half shocked, half admiring. "So, he paid $1 billion for land he can't even touch." "He paid $1 billion, Hoang corrected, "for land that could get him arrested." They exchanged a look, one full of silent triumph. But Hoang wasn't done. He opened another drawer, pulling out a rolled-up map. "And here's the real twist," he said, spreading it out. "This is the alternate route. It's longer, but flatter. I just needed a legal road through the hill, not necessarily that hill." Dai leaned over the map. "This route goes behind Canh's property?" Hoang nodded. "Exactly. And thanks to Clause 7.2, he's legally obligated to provide access to whichever direction I choose. Even if the path doesn't go across his land, he must not obstruct it, or he faces fines and contract violation charges." Dai's forehead creased, then relaxed as he slowly understood. "So the whole time, he only thought he bought the road to your business. But he bought nothing." Hoang smiled. "He bought dust." At that exact moment, on the other side of the hill, Canh was stomping around furiously while ordering his men to extend the fence. Sweat dripped down his temples, soaking the collar of his shirt. He barked commands like a man possessed. "Hurry up! Make the fence taller! Double the wire! Nobody enters this land without crossing my blade." But for every stake they hammered, for every rock they dragged, the land responded strangely. The ground under their feet shifted, cracked, and crumbled. One of Canh's men shouted, "Boss! The soil's sliding. This isn't stable." Canh snapped, "Shut up. Just build. I don't care if the earth collapses. We block this road at any cost." His men exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared defy him. By noon, the fence stood tall, ugly, mismatched, but imposing. Canh stood proudly beside it, chest heaving, convinced he had crippled Hoang's last lifeline. But his smile faded the moment a white pickup truck rolled up the dirt road. It was Hoang. And right behind him, 2 officials from the Geological Bureau stepped out. Chan stumbled backward, almost tripping over his own fence. What are you doing here?" Hoang didn't answer. Instead, the older official held up a clipboard. "Mr. Canh, we received a legal complaint regarding unauthorized structural activity on unstable terrain." Can's jaw slackened. "What complaint? Who complained?" Hoang raised a hand calmly. "I did." 2 of Khan's men dropped their tools in shock. The official pointed at the crude barbed wire fence. "This construction is illegal. This entire hillside is under geological monitoring. You cannot dig or build here without approval. You are now subject to investigation and an administrative fine. You must remove everything immediately." Canh sputtered. But I own the land." "That doesn't exempt you from the law," the official replied sharply. "And according to your contract with Mr. Dai, Clause 8.4 states clearly that major alterations are forbidden. You signed this document." He held up the contract. Canh went pale. Hoang stepped forward slightly, hands in pockets. "If you need help understanding the contract, I can explain it to you in simpler words." Canh glared at him, face twitching. You set me up." Hoang gave him a gentle smile. "You trapped yourself. Greed is the best net." The official gestured to the workers. "All this must be removed within 48 hours. And Mr. Canh, you may face additional charges depending on the land inspection report." Can's eyes widened with dread. "Charges? What charges?" The official arched a brow. "If the digging weakened the hillside, you may be liable for geological damage. That can include fines, forced restoration, and even prosecution." For a moment, there was silence. Then panic burst out of Canh like a broken dam. He grabbed the fence with shaking hands. No, I won't remove it. This is my land. I bought it fair and square. That hill belongs to me." Hoang walked closer, voice low and almost kind. "Yes, it's your land. And now you get to pay for maintaining it, restoring it, and fixing any damage you caused. Congratulations." Can's men backed away from him, knowing he had fallen deeper than any of them expected. Hoang didn't stay long. He didn't need to. The officials took photos, measured the cracks, and made notes while Canh stared blankly at the fence he had built with so much pride. The hot wind blew again, making the wires tremble like mocking laughter. By late afternoon, Hoang and Dai stood together on a ridge overlooking the hills. Below them, Can's world had turned into a chaotic nightmare. Workers arguing, officials measuring slopes, and Canh shouting like a man drowning in his own mess. Dai exhaled. "Hoang, you really planned every step." Hoang shook his head. "I just understood the kind of man Canh is. He always attacks openly. All I had to do was leave the door open and let him sprint straight into the wall." Dai chuckled, the heaviness finally lifting from his shoulders. "So what now?" Hoang smiled at the horizon. "Now, we start building the new road tomorrow, the legal one. And as for Canh, let him spend his days patching cracks in soil he never should have touched. Dai nodded, filled with a deep, renewed respect. The sky glowed orange as the sun dipped low, bathing the land in warm light. For the first time in weeks, the future didn't look dark. It looked wide open. Far below, Canh's furious screams echoed faintly across the hills. But up on the ridge, Hoang and Dai just stood in silence, letting the wind carry those screams far, far away. Hoang didn't need revenge. He only needed patience, because sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let him defeat himself.